and we're in the pack, and Blake didn't see it, and I just hear the gunshot that is him, his back wheel just bam, just hitting, going straight into the pothole. The most formative experience for me on the bike probably was during the Tour de Rwanda, and that was my third international trip. At that time, I was racing for the Mark Pro Cycling team, and we'd gotten word that we would be racing in July, I think in May. For us, getting the invitation to Tour de Rwanda represented a huge stepping stone, not only for the program, but for a lot of the riders who had aspirations to move up a level, just because the international competition at this race was impressive. And the race itself had a very storied history of highly regarded competition, not only from the African continent, but a bunch of European teams coming there as well. And, we got ready, and traveling there, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd never been to any country in Africa before, and I think when I got there, it was just amazing the reception that cyclists got. Part of what I like to do is before I travel to any particular country, I kind of like to investigate the cycling scene there before I go. I think this is more just to see, what exactly was the history behind cycling in Rwanda. And Rwandan cycling scene has a pretty incredible history. So post-genocide, which happened in 1994, the country, it was trying to assemble a national identity to kind of bring the country together after the civil war between, feuding groups within the population. And funny enough, they wanted to try and utilize sport and find a sport to bring together people and galvanize the population around a singular athletic endeavor. And funny enough, they landed on cycling. And cycling became, I think, behind soccer, the biggest sport in the country. And in 2005, Tom Ritchie of Ritchie Components, he traveled to Rwanda just on a whim. He wanted to go and mountain bike there because he had gotten word that the roads there and the trails there were incredible. And he came and he saw the vibrancy that the country's culture had to offer, and their enthusiasm for bike riding and bike racing, and the utilization of the bike within the population at large as a means of travel. And he wanted to build on that, and he worked then, I think, starting in 2005 and officially in 2006 to form Team Africa Rising, which then blossomed into the Rwandan national team and national federation for cycling. But we arrived there, and it again, you get there and you don't really know what to expect, because having ridden in countries prior to this like China or the Dominican Republic, there is a sense of what cycling is as just a pastime or a hobby. People will watch you as you go ride your bike. And in China, for example, they just see you riding your bike and maybe they just think, oh, there's a bike rider. But everyone, when we arrived to Kigali, knew that there was the bike race going on. I mean, it was the national event. It was a national point of national pride, I guess you could say. And we had people cheering us on. We had kids running next to us and cheering us on as we were riding uphill and warming up the couple days before the race. And I'd never experienced that kind of reception from the population at large. So that was overwhelming to see the excitement of the population. Then once the race started, I mean, the country itself was beautiful. And I think it's always nice to be in a place where even when the racing is hard or the racing is dull, if you just take those 5 seconds to look around you and see what you're seeing, it's overwhelmingly beautiful. And it's probably one of the more stunning places I've gotten to race. Aside from the natural beauty of the country, I still throughout the week could not get over just the consistency of the enthusiasm of everybody there. I mean, every stage that we raced, there were people lining the roads for the entire 180, 200 plus kilometer stage, and people cheering on and just getting so excited. And I'd never seen that kind of enthusiasm before. And unfortunately, I think around stage 4 of 8, I contracted some kind of stomach bug, which at one end was awful because it meant that I couldn't really compete anymore. I was waking up every day, dry heaving. I could barely get any solid food down and was just drinking water. And so by the time that, we were actually trying to compete for some results, and I remember the day before I told my teammates, yeah, I actually feel my legs coming around. I feel myself adjusting to the altitude. It's, boom. The next day I was out, just down for the count. But still, I think getting to continue the race and continue to ride in the race, even though I wasn't racing at that point. It actually afforded me an opportunity that people in professional cycling or international cycling don't really get that often, which is to just enjoy the scenery around you. Because when you're in the middle of a race, typically your mind is so focused on the dynamics of the race, making sure you don't bump a wheel in front of you, you got to eat, you got to drink. You're focusing on everything but your surroundings, funny enough. You're only focusing on the wheel in front of you, to your left and to your right. And you don't get that opportunity to kind of stop and take a look around and see what you're seeing versus, when you are kind of chewing your stem the entire day and just trying to survive, there are days when the pressure of racing isn't actually there. It's the pressure to make the time cut and be able to continue the stage, but you can actually, within the Gruppetto, take a time to look around you. And I remember I was in the Gruppetto, and I think this was stage 5 or 6, and we were riding through mountainous hillsides, which there are a lot of. It's known as the Land of 1,000 Hills. So there was a very hilly course that year. And I remember looking over, and we were riding along this highway ridge that kind of bisects the entire country. And looking over and out into the valley, you could see the tea plantations that had been constructed in the hillsides. And it forms a series of concentric circles that build up towards the sky in a conical shape. And at one point, we were so high that you could actually look down onto that hillside. So it kind of looked like a target formation. But it's the sheer magnitude of where you are and how high you are to be able to get to look down on a hillside and make it feel like it's almost flat, such that a picture forms. And I remember that vividly. And, I don't know if I would have seen that had I actually been racing. But as we continued on, the enthusiasm for the race never waned. And I'll never forget this moment. So I think we're at stage 7 now. And as the race had progressed, a local who I think had been born in Kigali, he was leading the race. And part of the enthusiasm for a local leading the race and who's probably going to win it not only includes cheering for that local, but at the same time kind of booing anybody else. And so as we're riding, you hear all of these locals screaming out at all of the European riders and the American riders, Muzungu, which I think is a Kinyarwanda word. According to what I had been told by a couple of people who'd worked in the State Department, that means foreigner. So it kind of felt weird as I'm riding and you have all these locals scream Muzungu at you, but as it never felt like it was actually out of any animosity. It was just, I think it's the equivalent of, for example, you go to like a Phillies game or something, or like an Eagles game, and it's just like part of cheering on your local team is booing the other team. It's not because you have any real like dislike towards anybody. That's just, and that's the spirit of it. And I think that's why I likened it to the idea of football or basketball or baseball, because there's that almost franchised sport support that you have for your hometown heroes and the national team that is racing there. So much so that it's just like it's that fierce kind of fandom that you get in an American mainstream sport. And I think that was impressive. And I'll never forget this. I'm riding along. I'm absolutely whacked. This is day 6 or something. I've been sick for days. I can barely see straight because I haven't eaten. And I'm with a group of other people, and we're all riding along. And a little girl is standing with her parents, and they're cheering for everybody riding along. And the people are screaming, Muzungu, like, oh, Americans, they're coming through. And this little girl, she couldn't have been more than 5. She's just throwing me the bird, like she's just like flipping me and the group off, and she's smiling. And at that moment, I was just like, I couldn't really process it at the time, but it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It's just this little 5-year-old girl who has no idea what she's doing. And so we continue throughout the stage race, and we bounce around to different towns within the country. And finally, the last stage is in Kigali, the city. So we started in Kigali, kind of circumnavigated the country, and then we ended up back in Kigali and did a city circuit, which includes the famous Wall of Kigali, which is pretty much the Flandrian equivalent of, say, a Koppenberg or a Paterberg or an Haut de Clermont in Rwanda. It's this brutally hard, steep hill that runs through the middle of Old Town, and it's built with these old big cobbles, and it's just this steep climb that you have to navigate. And Blake, Anton, and me, we were the last two teammates in our team to be left, and we're both just fighting to make this time cut in this race, because they said if you don't make it to this certain point within a certain amount of time, like 6 minutes of the lead group, we're going to cut you. But we make the time cut into the cutoffs. We get to ride the city circuit, and we get to ride the Wall of Kigali, and we go up. And I've never seen a city just descend upon a race like everybody did to cheer on all the riders. I mean, you had construction workers sitting on top of buildings, stop what they're doing, all of them, to just sit and watch everybody 3 stories up go through the town. You had every single business pretty much shut down to have everybody come out onto the streets, and there were thousands of people there. To this day, I've never seen that many people at a bike race. It is the closest thing you could get to having a packed stadium, I think, in cycling. When I say there were people everywhere, 3 rows deep along the sidewalk, I mean it. Everywhere on that course. And so Blake and I, we just scraped together whatever energy we had left, and we finished the race. And it felt good to do that, just because I was sick the entire time and it felt good to complete it. But more importantly, I felt like I'd actually been able to experience a racing culture there, rather than just go about the race and kind of check a box. And to this day, Rwanda is probably one of the coolest places I've visited.